Good day, everybody, and happy holidays. I hope you're having a terrific season here. Before we all turn towards the new year, I just want to welcome you to the ISBAO SafetyNet webinar series presented today by Polaris Aero, Steve Bruneau, and Michael Ripley. Today's topic, single aircraft operations. SMS isn't a burden, it's an enabler. I'm so looking forward to this presentation. I'm Catherine Hilst, and I am the ISBAO Operations Manager. Just wanted to run through a few housekeeping items before we get started here. Just a reminder, you all are on mute, but we would love to have you submit any questions that you have throughout the presentation for the Q&A at the end. On the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll have a spot, a little drop down that says questions, and you can put your questions or your comments or your thoughts in there anytime you'd like, and we'll look at that after the presentation. So you might have heard or even said, SMS is too hard, SMS is overkill for my department. We're all highly skilled and vigilant about safety. Why do we need an SMS? All of those things that roll through our minds sometimes. So this webinar is designed to address those sorts of concerns and demystify the value proposition and work involved. We'll be discussing the various benefits and implication of having a strong safety program, even with a single tail operation. Steve Bruneau is Vice President of Aviation Services at Polaris Aero and is responsible for expanding the company's suite of safety management solutions. He, prior to Polaris, was the Chief Operating Officer of Pulsar Informatics, delivering fatigue risk management systems to aviation organizations of all FAR types, including maintenance and ground handling departments. He has over 25 years of process consulting experience helping organizations meet regulatory requirements or achieve new levels of performance. He has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering, and has been a leader of 3 successful startup companies prior to joining Polaris. And Michael Ripley is the safety manager at DuPont Aviation, a Part 91 operator out of Delaware. He's a 3rd generation A&P mechanic and obtained his license in Greensboro, North Carolina. Started his aviation career in 2006, working the line at a family-owned FBO and Part 145 operation. After receiving his license, he moved back into the shop where he worked on all types of GA airframes. He's promoted to Challenger 300 lead technician in 2011, and in 2014 took a job with DuPont as a flight technician. In 2019, he was promoted to maintenance technician supervisor, and in 2020 was appointed to safety manager responsibility. He's a master technician in the CL300, G550, and in his safety manager role has successfully completed his first ISBAO audit in June of this year. Rock on, Michael. All right, Steve, Michael, I'm going to hand it off to you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Welcome, everyone, and special thanks to Michael for taking some time to share what they do at DuPont and the way it affects a small single tail operator. So again, DuPont has a big name, but presently there's a single airplane that their fleet is comprised of, and he'll explain a little bit more about that, but he'll certainly talk about his experience. As Catherine said at the start of this, we often come across small operators who question, geez, formalizing SMS, that's a big lift. I don't know why we have to do that. That seems like overkill. We're small, as Catherine indicated earlier. So what I hope you can hear today is just from Michael's perspective, kind of address some of those things and look at ways in which you can kind of maybe rethink, how formalizing SMS in your organization could be easier than you may have a perception going into today's session. So with that, we'll move forward and talk about our presentation today. So the agenda we're going to follow. I want to cover some of the common refrains that small operators will say to me specifically, and we hear throughout the industry. And then we want to lay out some fundamentals around SMS, because oftentimes people, again, when you look at SMS, there's sort of a perception that it's littered in all the little detailed things you need to do. And the reality of SMS is that these standards tell you what to do, not necessarily how to do them. So you can be compliant with what's requested in a multitude of ways, things that are easier for small operators than big operators in many cases. So it's important to understand the difference between what's asked to be done and then how you go about achieving that. And I think some of the things we'll hear about today from Michael will be a little bit eye-opening for some. Underneath that, a big part of being a small team is the culture. So when you have a small culture and you are dynamic and you put in place a formalized SMS program, you kind of have a little bit of resistance to structure, right? A little bit of that formality. But I think you're going to hear some great words of advice from Michael today that shows you that structure actually helps the culture and can really move everything forward. So we're pretty excited about that. Underneath this area, we're going to cover specifics like leadership, the risk management process itself, and how that formalizes some processes that you probably do now. You just don't probably have it as formalized as you'd like. Talk about the safety assurance pillar of SMS and just making sure that you guys, monitor that you do the things you say you do. And then promotion. How does the safety information get promoted throughout the team? And Michael's got some great stories about being a small organization and the way he does it with DuPont. And then ultimately, there's some ways to think about SMS, not just in a here today moment, but how does this really help with business continuity? How does the flight department that you represent today benefit 3 years from now, 5 years from now by the work you put in today? Or conversely, as you'll hear from Michael, how did he benefit when he took over safety from the work that the predecessors had done? So again, that's powerful when you think about leaving a legacy for your organization, because again, the organization is going to go on well after we're all working for each of our companies. And then last but not least, we'll cover some parting thoughts. So that's sort of the framework of the conversation we want to go through today. And we very much want this to be a conversation. So I'm going to kind of frame out these things to Michael and let him talk about his experiences. And then there'll be the questions at the end. So let's talk a little bit about the common refrains. Again, Catherine kind of alluded to some of these in the intro. SMS is too hard, or SMS is overkill for my department, or hey, we have a bunch of highly skilled, vigilant people focused on safety. Why do we need a formal SMS? And the reality is that these 3 bullets. Number one, no organization is too small to improve what they do. I mean, I think hopefully everyone feels that way no matter what business you're in. The second bullet is important too, that you likely are very safe as a small organization because you do have highly skilled, vigilant people. And the reality of it is that you probably have a lot of the ingredients necessary for an SMS anyway. So formalizing is really just that. It's not like you have to reinvent the wheel. You probably have a lot of the components. So hopefully we can explore some of those things today. And then last but not least, there is effort in SMS. So we're not trying to like pull the curtain over your eyes and say, well, this is easy like falling off a rock. There is work to be done, but I think you're going to hear through the experiences of Michael and DuPont that there's great benefits that come from that. So, putting in a little extra work to formalize what you already do now probably can actually produce results that you probably aren't able to get in an unformalized way. So again, those are sort of the real high level. Hopefully, you didn't come in with that perception, but if you did, hopefully you leave with the bottom reaction as well. So let's talk a little bit about safety and some realities, right? The first reality is that there is risk in aviation. We all know that. We're not going to get rid of risk. The only way we can completely eliminate risk is if we park the airplane in the hangar, but that's not why we have an airplane, right? So the whole idea of safety management is to address hazards so that we improve the likelihood of safe operation. So this is all about minimizing risk as much as possible, staying ahead of it. And then the other truth is that in order to improve, no matter what size operation you have, you need to manage what you measure, right? And that's the important part. The SMS is going to provide an objective measurement tool so that you have the ability to make great management decisions with sort of actual data points, not just gut feel or perception. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you're approaching your leadership about putting in an SMS, oftentimes there's pushback at the leadership level. I want you to think about these concepts of managing what you measure. As an individual, many of us do this ourselves, right? We try to manage our retirement account. We try to manage our health through our iWatch. Maybe we just step on a bathroom scale once a week and check our weight. Don't do this the first week of January. The holidays will be brutal, right? But the point is, what you're doing with all of those kinds of mechanisms is you're tracking your personal evolution, and you're using objective data to know whether your investments are working the way you intend, whether your diet's doing the right thing, or whether your exercise is achieving what you want. So in the same way, having objective data gives you the guidance to make corrective actions. Businesses are no different, and that's true of small or large differences. So when you talk to your leaders, you want to talk about it in the terms of the kinds of reports and objective data they typically use. And no matter what size organization you have, I'm sure there's budgets, I'm sure they track expenses, and that those are the tools that leaders typically use to make decisions by. So let's treat SMS with the exact same approach. Let's talk about safety performance indicators and the ability to track these things as the exact same thing. And when you approach your leadership armed with objective data of the kinds of things that you're seeing that can induce safety problems or performance problems due to safety, they want to know about that. And now, again, you're approaching them with objective data, not just a gut feel. You'll find that that's going to get a lot more attention than just sort of winging it, right? And I think you guys can all probably appreciate that with different aspects of your flight departments. So let's move forward with thinking about, okay, if we're going to go forward and put in place an objective SMS, what are the 4 pillars? And again, these are the areas you need to have in order to have an SMS. Again, this isn't intended to be a deep dive into all of these, but again, when you think about what you need to do versus how, start with the 4 whats. So the first one is you need to have a safety policy. Maybe you already have something, you just haven't formalized it. Maybe you just need to formalize it and review it once a year. Suddenly, and you have an accountable executive sign off on that. As soon as you do that, you're pretty much compliant with the safety policy area. And ISBAO has plenty of example templates you can use. Risk management. The whole idea of risk management, keeping it simple, is if you see a problem, report it, analyze what led to the problem, and let's come up with a fix or a corrective action so that it doesn't keep happening. You probably do these sorts of things now, but you want to make it a little bit more objective so that you can, again, show an auditor that you're actually doing this and benefit from keeping an eye on problems, as you'll hear from Michael. The 4th area is safety assurance. This is where you simply monitor that the procedures you have in place for your team and your operational cadence, that you actually are doing them and you're following the procedures, because those procedures are influenced by the changes you make from your risk management approach. So if you presently check on how people do their work, you're probably already doing audits or the beginnings of audits. So adding a little bit more formality, again, you probably already do these things. And then last but not least is safety promotion. Safety promotion simply is saying, how do you promote safety to your team? How are they made aware of problems? How are they made aware of improvements? How are they made aware of just general things happening in the industry and the audit process and all that kind of stuff? So you probably communicate in a multitude of ways right now. Just formalizing that a little bit ends up putting you, close to being, compliant with the safety promotion pillar. So when you step back and you think about these 4 areas, even being a small flight department, you probably do some element of this already, just probably not in as a structured way as you might want to do. So hopefully you'll learn some things. By the way, this is the FAA graphic on this, which I think is really clean and effective. But I think you're going to hear from Michael. There's a lot of things that they do at DuPont that probably aren't all that different than what you're capable of with your small flight department as well. So I want to dispel another myth, right? This is not about, hey, we just get an SMS and we've solved world hunger. At the end of the day, like anything in business, it really requires good people, good processes, and to a great extent, technology to help you. And Michael is going to give you some great examples there. So what do I mean? So when we think about our people, you want to make sure that everyone on our team is well trained and they have, you're appropriately resourced, right? So you're not overworked. Make sure they're engaged in the process, they're empowered to participate, and they're encouraged to participate. That's very important. So you're going to hear some great examples from Michael. On the process side of things, how you do things, is that documented in your ops manual? Are those procedures as lean as possible, and are they results oriented? Those are the things that being in a small operation tends to really be good at, right? You don't need a big arduous process. You just need a nice, clean, effective process. And if you document it, you're kind of halfway there, or you're quite a ways along the way. And then where technology can help is, there are a lot of moving parts. So just keep track of things. So you want to make sure, however you pick your technology to support and you don't have to have technology to do your SMS. You can do SMS on the back of a napkin if you wanted to. It just gets a little bit hard to keep up with the napkins, right? So technology is just a way to make it a little bit simpler to help do, whether it's the reporting end, whether it's the back end processing end, or whether it's the graphing and charting and auditing and stuff like that. So technology can just really make the whole process a lot simpler. And when all of these things are working together, you have a pretty effective system. And I would argue that what you're going to hear today from Michael Ripley is a great example of all 3 components working in unison. So along those lines, let's jump a little bit into the cultural piece And I'm going to ask Michael to first talk about the importance of leadership in his environment.
All right, well, thank you. And thank you, Catherine, for the introduction, and Steve for inviting me to share my SMS and all around safety experience here at DuPont. A brief history, DuPont started over 200 years ago on the banks of the Brandywine River right here in Wilmington, Delaware, where we made gunpowder. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of accidents at first. And from those accidents, lessons were learned and a safety culture was created. Fast forward 200 years, when I got my start with DuPont, we were a multi-tail operator. And then due to a merger and subsequent split, we became a much smaller 7-person team with a single tail G550. And during this, early in the start of the new department, our safety manager at the time retired, and that's when I assumed the position. Also, while this was all happening, it coincided with the pandemic, during which our Stage 3 ISBEO expired. So we always had a strong safety culture here at DuPont. So when getting started, I knew I had the support of our director, who was also a safety manager once before. And that's really huge, having that support, because as I truly believe, that this SMS and then the safety culture starts from the top down. And I'm truly encouraged to, continue my safety education, go to safety events, which is huge in my continued education. I was fortunate to have team members that had gone through ISBEO audits before, and their insights were invaluable in helping me, mentoring me on the ISBEO process and helping me formulate, a game plan. Now, what I would say for someone starting fresh without all the support that I had, you might want to reach out to like a third-party consultant to start that SMS journey. There is so much information out there through the MBAA, IBAC, flight safety. One example for us is Quality Resources. We use them for all our manuals and revisions, updates, and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So let's talk a little. Oh, did you have something else, sir? Sorry.
No, that's it.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the safety risk management process, because this is where oftentimes the perception of a lot of work comes in. And just to put everybody on sort of the same working page, let's go over the process. So the process of risk management is to receive safety input, and that's safety reporting. If you're participating in the ASAP program, if you have FOQA on your airplane, if you're just learning things in the industry from like FAA website, FAA's SIAS program, or your training provider, or maybe you're just reading great articles in different venues and you learn things. All of these things become inputs to your safety, right? How can we improve our own operation? And then you need to have somebody basically process that. What did we just learn? Does that apply for us? If it applies for us, how would we implement? All those sorts of things. So that's where the risk management process comes in, right? To really diagnose what it is, whether it was a problem that actually happened or a thing that you might want to do from a positive change perspective. Who's going to be involved? How does this affect our processes? Do we have to, procure things? Where do we do this? How often do we do these things? And most importantly, what will the outcome of making this change be? Or in the case of something that actually happened in a negative sense, how will a change we make avoid this problem from reoccurring? That's a big part of what the safety manager job helps facilitate. And Michael will give some examples in a few moments. So from that, your SMS will look for those sort of trends and help you keep track of all these things, because ultimately those trends and things that you see become the impetus to say, you know what, we've seen enough of this lately. We really need to address this. This is a problem. And again, you're going to hear that from Michael in a few moments. So when you do have those corrective actions, you're going to then want to fold that back into your process so that each time you fly, you're flying even more safely than you did the last time. Or next time you fix an airplane, you're doing that particular activity safer than the last time you did it. And then of course, when you either fly or do some maintenance activity or ground handling activity, you should perform debrief reports. right? What did we just learn doing what we just did? Was there some little nuance about the airport that we just flew into that we can learn from? Was there some nuance about the maintenance activity we just did that others could benefit from the next time we do this? By doing this sort of closed loop process, you're really creating what I like to call a safety knowledge management engine. You're continually building up knowledge within the organization that hopefully carries forward for quite some time. So let's talk a little bit about that, Michael, from your perspective. Maybe touch on some of the key inputs that you've gone through with safety reporting.
Sure. So what I've seen, the problem without having a structured SMS, in a smaller department is you might run into that situation of, just fixing something and move on. And the problem with that is, the employees don't know what the problem was, what was fixed, or what was put into place so that doesn't happen again. So at our new department, we adopted a new web-based SMS, which I honestly didn't know much about. And truth be told, I didn't know a whole lot about the previous one we had. But I knew its potential. And with time came familiarity. And now it's working almost autonomously. The team realized how easy it is to actually file a report, and they do so freely now. It's really great. And having the structured SMS really gives us the confidence that when a report is made, it will be seen through to its end. We don't have that headache anymore of, okay, I identified a hazard. What do I do with it now? How is it going to get fixed? Having that structured SMS gives us that ability. And another great thing about it is that it's all on the same platform for all of us. So we can access it through our iPhones, our iPads, or your laptop, and so on. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a lot of extra work at first. And that's why I had to get everyone involved. It was so important to make it a team effort because, at small operations, we all wear a lot of hats, so we have to do everything as a real group effort. Spreading the duties amongst the team, it really allowed all of us to take ownership of the SMS.
Right, and I think the question, Michael, on the last one there about being small, I often hear about that, being small, do you report on yourself? Maybe you can touch on that because your other team members getting involved was a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll report on myself just because, if it can happen to me, it could happen to anyone on the team. And when I do report on myself, I'll make sure to have another team member, do a review and an assessment, and then the analysis again will be done by another one of the team members, just so there's no bias there.
Thanks. Let's talk about some examples. You gave me a couple of good ones. We're going to summarize here.
Sure. So a couple safety report examples. So recently we had a trip to an airport, and this was regarding an FBO in which the pilots found the ramp to be too narrow, too cluttered for safe operation. And so we put it through the process. We identified the hazard, an assessment of the airport was performed, and then alternates were analyzed. And ultimately we found a solution. And just the solution was simply to use another FBO. But the process worked. And now anytime that we are going to fly to this particular airport, we're alerted to not use that FBO, in which we found to be unsafe. So it shows from start to finish how the process was carried out. Another example for us was a damaged accordion gate was identified. And again, so the flow was put into place. The hazard was identified. It was reported. We assessed the problem, analyzed the fix, and it was fixed. And all of these were documented, on our SMS. And I think without a structured platform like that, I think these incidents or accidents would still be out there, haunting, possibly ready to strike. I stress the documentation portion of our SMS because it's our proof, it's our proof that we're doing what our SMS says. And it's an easy way for us to, show these objective examples to any auditor that might be coming in.
Perfect. And having that objective data is critical to leadership too, which I think kind of gets to the next piece on the
It's all
SPIs.
about the data, right?
Yeah, talk about that.
So, you know, being a small operation, it's true that you don't generate a whole lot of safety reports. And so since this is the case, it was important for us to create these safety performance indicators in which we were seeing the most reports for. And with that, we needed to make realistic thresholds. The goal is always 0 as far as, you know, accidents, preventing accidents go, but that's just not the reality. And at the end of the year, what's important for us is, as we analyze all the data we collect, is to know that we can change these SPIs. We can change these thresholds if we're finding them to be ineffective. You know, they're not set in stone. I'll give you an example of one of our objectives in the SPI and SPT for that. The first one was for us to reduce the risk of issues incurred during FBO visits. And any issue, towing, it could be congestion, staffing, catering, you know, et cetera. The performance indicator for this objective would be the number of reports related to FBO visits as reported by safety report. And so per the total number of operations away from home base. And we found a threshold for this would be 0.05. So basically out of 100, you know, operations, we were willing to accept 5 reports. And at the end of the year, if we were to, you know, look at the data and it was more than 5, we might have an area of an issue that we need to spend a little more time on. Another objective for us was to, you know, reduce the risks of accidents during aircraft hangar movements. You know, that's always a big one for any operator. The performance indicator for this one was the number of observed unsafe movements, and unsafe movements can be, you know, where they'll have wing walkers, a gear pin wasn't installed, the steering wasn't disconnected. And, you know, any of these reports, you know, per the total number of reports per operation away from home base. And the, the total number of movements per total number of takeoff and landings at home base reported through safety reports. And the threshold for this one we did was 0.02. And so for every 100 movements, you know, we were willing to accept 2 reports.
I think it's important.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, oh, good, I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, I was going to say it's important to point out the things that you mentioned on the airplane movements, the little things, right? Oftentimes people think that reporting thing is only when something bad happens, like as an outcome bad. In the case of having a movement where you forgot to have the right number of wing walkers, or you didn't disconnect the steering, or any of those things, there may not have been a negative outcome other than the fact that the process wasn't followed. So by keeping track of when process isn't followed, it's inevitable that if you fix that, you're reducing the likelihood of having negative outcomes. So the tracking the little things is as important, if not more important, than tracking just the big things.
It helps you be preemptive, you know?
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about.
And I just want to mention one more time on that one. Again, these thresholds and SPIs, they can always be changed. You know, these are new for us, and we just came up with these, you know, during our last SBAO audit. So at the end of the year, you know, we'll see if these are effective SPIs, SPTs, and they can be changed.
Exactly. I think that's a big part of the flexibility, right? So when you're a small operator, depending on the mission that you fly, you pick the safety performance indicators that match, you know, what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. And typically SPIs you don't want to have 1,000 of them, right? You only want to have a handful of things that give you the right direction in your safety program. And again, you probably do these sorts of things as a group now. It's just formalizing it a bit more.
Exactly.
We talked about process, right? Because again, when the process isn't followed, that's when, you know, things can go bad, right? Whether it might not go bad, but it could. So the whole idea of keeping track of how well you're performing to your process, that's where safety assurance comes in, right? So maybe we can talk a little bit about how DuPont goes about your auditing process.
Sure. So, you know, you have to ensure that the process is followed. You know, it's a key part of that for us is our audits. And you need to document what your SMS says you're doing. We do use Vocus SMS, and we set up a progressive yearly umbrella audit, and that is broken down into different tasks, and each task is then assigned to a different team member throughout the year. The task can include monthly, quarterly checklists, internal audits, base inspections, just to name a few. And the nice part about these audits is that everyone's included. And the required task of the audit shows up in their email, and with reminders. So it gives accountability. So
excellent. And then communication is the other, promotion is the other pillar. Talk a little bit about that. Sure
thing. A real benefit of having a small flight department is the ease of communication. It's huge in every aspect of our job, but especially in safety. I can hold scheduled or unscheduled meetings, and with us, all the minutes and notes from these meetings we can then load into our SMS, which is accessible by all the employees. And if necessary, I can put in a required read that automatically pops up in the employee's email that they have to read any sort of safety sensitive material. And again, like I said, it's all done web-based, so it's kind of autonomous.
Actually, and you have the record, right? So when the auditor
exactly documentation.
Exactly. Show me that you're actually communicating what you just.
Everyone, you can say you're great, but you got to prove. You got to prove it. So.
Exactly. So let's talk a little, like I mentioned early on, I think a big part of the whole safety program is to put in place a process at an organization that carries on or serves as a platform to build from going forward. And I like to say that there's a fact that the company is going to be around a lot longer than any of us are going to work for it, for the most part, hopefully if we're lucky, right? And then so the goal of putting in place an SMS is to leave a foundation that your successor can build from. And one of the cool things is Michael was able to pick up some work from his successor. So I think it kind of exemplifies this whole idea of what you pass forward is only improving the organization as a whole. So Michael, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I was fortunate to have a safety foundation in place when I took over. We had all our manuals that had already been written, your FOM, IFOM, CRP. I had to make a lot of revisions and updates, since assuming the role. And going through our SBAO. But I think starting from scratch would have been a little more difficult. But again, I can't stress enough about a third-party consultant. There's so much information out there and so many people willing to help. Again, like I said, Quality Resources did all our manuals. It was definitely a fair amount of work getting started. I'm not going to lie. This was my first dive into an SMS that was going to be my own. But now, I'm confident that the foundation is there for whoever precedes me. Honestly, I look forward to showing off our SMS, to any potential new employees. I take a lot of pride in it. And for me, it would be key, if I were to go to another operation to see what kind of, safety foundation is in place. I think it could be used as a really good, recruiting tool.
That's a good point. You mentioned culture. I mean, and you talked about culture at DuPont as a whole, the culture that you have now with your flight department, and in that comment, projecting that culture as a recruitment tool. Let's talk a little bit about how you go about impacting culture and building momentum with your team. So again, just sharing some of your experiences would be great.
Well, I found the biggest, way to build a momentum with the team was having everyone be part of that, SBAO audit. And it was a good way of getting everyone to embrace the SMS. Everyone took pride in their role, towards achieving the accreditation. And it's really, honestly, has stuck. Safety concerns are brought up freely and worked through as a team. It's gratifying to see those improvements, and it's showing an advancement in our operation. Without the support of the team, I think that, managing the SMS would become a little overwhelming. It's truly a team effort. But with this small group, I can rely on everyone's engagement.
Yeah, I think that's cool, and you do have that participation, which is key. So it's not just you carrying a bag of rocks up a hill.
Sure, exactly. It's everyone's got to be on board.
Yeah, exactly. And so what were the key? I mean, obviously not everyone comes into an organization singing "Kumbaya," right? Or a leader
Right, including
like,
myself.
yeah, well, good point, right? So maybe talk a little bit about the keys to changing your mindset. What were the things that went through your mind and helped change the way you think about SMS?
Well, for me, I did some formal training and that helped, but ultimately for me, it was going through that first ISBAO audit. It was a real eye opener. I didn't realize the scope of everything is involved in that. And I think really, just as a note, if anyone's looking to, start learning about safety and what the standard is, that I would take a look at the protocols and start see how your company matches up. For me doing it, I learned that safety is integral to all parts of the operation, not just what I was doing in maintenance. And a big thing for me is that SMS not only protects the employees, because that's the goal at the end of the day. We all want to go home safe to our families, but it also protects the company. My father used to he had a line, he was in aviation as well. And he used to say, how's it going to look in the Monday morning paper? Were there some systems in place to prevent, such an accident or such an issue? Because the potential for lawsuits, it's real. And I think you could be in a lot of trouble if that were to happen and you didn't have some sort of formal structured SMS system.
Right. I think that's a good point there too, to mention that, things can happen, right? Aviation inherently has risk in it. So being able to demonstrate that you're taking steps necessary to reduce that risk is at least demonstrating that you're making an attempt to reduce the risk. If something bad happens and you're not able to demonstrate that you were doing anything to reduce the risk, then obviously that's not going to look very good, right? So you probably do things now, just how do you formalize it?
Right, exactly. And that process, from the, identifying, assessing, analyzing, and controlling these risks, it's helped us to improve, and it really has.
Exactly. So I know, obviously, again, back to the work effort and the formality piece of it. Talk a little bit about technology. How does the technology help you? Because again, you don't need technology to have an SMS. It's just really there to help facilitate. So maybe you could talk about your experience with some of that.
I can't imagine doing it without it. So, having a web-based SMS, it's been invaluable for implementing, the 4 pillars. Having access anytime, anywhere, on any device is key for the team. And when we find a report, this structured system, it gives us step-by-step guidance when working through a report. A report comes in, and then I'm prompted when going through it on really how to go it step by step, which is fantastic. It allows our internal audits to be seamless and not get missed, because that's a common theme where audits are getting missed. But with the technology and automatically putting emails out to team members, it's things aren't missed and reminders are put out there as well. And so it's just really beneficial for us. At the same time, when I talk about audits, it's easy for me to extract and provide visibility into our safety performance metrics. Without it, I can't imagine the paper trail. My drawers are full already, so I think that would be difficult. So
that's a good point.
Really, with it in place, and though it might be cliche, I sleep a little easier at night knowing when we have this system in place. And it's working for us.
That's a good point. So let's talk a little bit about, again, when you think about that, you tie it together, right? You got the information happens in your operation every single day, right? You've got your great people working on a small team, doing their best every single day. And what you need to enable is the ability for get all that information to the right people at the right time. And that's going to give you the ability to make better decisions. And that's where, again, when you have the right people and the right process and technology to help you, whatever technology fits your needs, these things do end up it's not just about being compliant, it's about really being a much better and safer operation as a result. Like Michael said, like y'all want to go home at the end of the day, right? So to the extent you can make this as simple as possible and operate more effectively and know that you're going home at the end of the day, then that's really a big part of the goal. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, and that's why we wanted to have Michael share his story with you today. So just in some part, oh, go ahead.
No, just saying, thanks for letting me do so.
Yeah, so let me just wrap up with some parting thoughts, and then we'll get to questions from the audience. The first thing is, again, takeaway, no organization is too small to improve. So when you think about your own operation today, just think about it. How do you guys capture things to improve your operation? And is there a way to formalize that? Could an SMS help you do that? Again, the key takeaway to that is with objective data, you have the means to improve, right? So managing what you measure is sort of a calling card that I want you to take away from today's presentation. Having a formal SMS system allows you to do that in a very structured way. Culture and leadership is so important. Small operations actually have the upper hand because small operations tend to work more like a family, right? There's a much more dynamic communication style. So that actually getting information out around safety information can oftentimes be easier at a small operation. And sometimes though, leadership, sometimes, they're stressed with different resource constraints. So you need to be able to articulate the value of safety programs in a business sense to the leadership to get that support. If you have that support already, all the better. It's important to point out again that many small operators, are staffed by highly seasoned people, super sensitive to safety, probably doing a lot of great things right now. So formalizing what you do probably isn't as heavy of a lift as you might think it is. So to Michael's comment earlier about just reviewing the protocols or talking to someone in the business, you may find that the gap analysis to getting where you need to be formality-wise is probably not that far. So it's worth the investigation. Another wraparound gets to the last slide where, again, there isn't like just train people and it works, or just fix a process and it works, or just get an SMS technology and it works. It doesn't work that way. You really have to make sure that people are engaged, the process is effective, and the technology is helping you. And if all three of those things are working in concert, that's when you're going to get the most amount of benefit from something like this. And then last but not least, as a small organization, I'll sometimes hear, well, we haven't had any problems. And I just want to leave you with the thought that the lack of problems in the past is not a guarantee of future safety. So this is something that is a work in progress. And just like Michael's examples earlier about problem at an FBO or a problem with equipment on their facility, those things can happen. And you need to stay ahead of it. You need to stay on top of it. And ultimately, you need to fix these things so that you don't have those things creep up and bite you. So with that, Catherine, I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
Awesome, Steve, Michael, wow, you hit on so many great points. I was back here just cheering away. I think for all aspects of any operation, your comment about, SMS protecting the individuals and the company, it's just such an ideal way to close the loop on the things that you're identifying, and that is so key. And the gap analysis, using the ISBAO protocols as a way to sort of see where you are. And so often we hear, well, we do that. It's just not documented. And so sit down and write it down, right? That's one of those big things. Yeah. So a couple of questions here. One is, Michael, you're on the maintenance side of things, and how easy is it for you investigating flight issues? What are the challenges? Is it just a non-issue? What's your perspective on that?
Well, again, like I said, we wear a lot of hats, and not only am I just in maintenance, but I'm also a flight technician. So I'm on the plane all the time. So if flight issues arise, I'm there to see it. And we have a great group that will self-disclose anything. So if something happens up there, we hear about it down here. So I'm fortunate in that sense.
That's great. Getting everybody on board and feeling comfortable with reporting is such a huge thing. And you were talking about the size, and I really appreciate the comment you made, Steve, about sometimes it's less of a burden in a smaller organization because of the communications.
Yeah.
with that in mind, if you don't have people on your team that actually have prior safety experience, to learn from, where might they find someone available to help get started and bounce best practices off of? What are some of your learnings and advice on that side?
Well,
Michael?
like I mentioned, I relied heavily on a lot of colleagues, but at the same time, I've gone to several safety events. For one, safety stand downs, they can be a great way to meet other people that are in safety sensitive roles, and just getting the insight and networking with those people is a really great way to get started. And there's a wealth of information, like I said, online as well through the different establishments out there.
Right, or I'll also point out, so just like you mentioned quality resources earlier too, I mean, you could lean on people like Polaris Aero or other vendors in the safety space as well. Certainly ISBAO has their PSA program, which has a lot of different vendors can help some guidance. So there's a lot of resources out there to get you start. Your insurance carrier can oftentimes lead you in the right direction as well. But again, sometimes those local safety stand downs can be the best because those are people who are right in your backyard. Might even be across the airport from you.
I was just going to say, any other operator on the field, pop your head in. People always like to share their experiences. So
Yeah,
Right?
we do tend to see it. I can just echo on that. We do tend to see at airports little sort of knowledge centers growing where organizations do have a lot of sharing across departments. Even though they're on the same field and might not see each other that often, there is quite a bit of sharing of information and knowledge. So it's definitely worth exploring that if you're not participating presently with your airport.
I am just posting the link to the ISBAO PSAs. The list that you rolled off there, Steve, is part of a longer list, and also I'll just take the moment to make a plug. We love hearing from everyone, even if you're just considering ISBAO or just have questions about it. To just give us a call on the ISBAO team. We're always happy, and we love to talk about all of this. It's what we do. It's our passion. As you can see from Steve and Michael as well. So you've got some friends there. So there's one other question here. When you talked about changing mindsets, not only your own, but people in an organization, and sometimes the challenges at senior management levels for some of this. But when you're trying to convince people of the merits of formalizing your SMS, you made a point about showing progress and presenting, objective data. Have you had any of your SPI charts expose something that was previously not really believed prior to the SMS programs?
For us, not yet. Like I mentioned, we just received the ISBAO in June, and so we are tracking this data now. And I'm excited to analyze it as the year ends and to see where we're at as far as our SPIs go. Is there something more we could be doing in different aspects of safety? So so far I haven't, but I'm looking forward to presenting that data. And like I said, with that structured SMS, it's so easy to extract, and it can put it in a graph for me, and it's that data that can be shown easily.
Yeah, that's and I want to point out to everybody in the audience too. We have all of these SafetyNet webinars are recorded, and you can go back and watch them. And Steve, you have done a number of these now, and dealing with that sort of being able to look at your indicators and the information that you get to sort of parse the information from a little bit different perspective. I don't know. Do you want to just touch on that for a minute? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
Yeah,
No
sorry about that. Yeah, so I mean, tracking anything, right? When you have any kind of data that you're tracking, you're able to look at it objectively and make decisions by it. So is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So whether it's maintenance related problems that are happening, whether it's problems at certain airports, problem in the aircraft. Again, Michael even mentioned things that are it's not that it's non-safety, but he mentioned things like catering issues or transportation issues, or those things ultimately, while they might not be safety in flight, they're safety to the trip, right? So it could be food poisoning, it could be a security issue with your executives, depending on who you're flying. So I mean, all these things are things that ultimately are you providing better service to whoever it is that you're flying. And safety is sort of the backbone to almost all of that. So in essence, safety management is just good process improvement, and tracking anything can help you improve it.
Yeah. That's all the questions we have. There is one, I've had a few requests here for the slides from this presentation. So I want to just remind you all, this will be available on a recording. You have Steve's email here. Feel free to get in touch with him to discuss that or see what he can do with that part of it. I really appreciate this topic because I know the smaller operators sometimes can find this a challenge, and I believe that this is something that is adaptable and scalable to any operation. And Michael, you touched on so many of the really important and pertinent points about putting this together and really just kind of documenting what you're already doing. And then having a standard and some tools to help you assess those and analyze them. And I love it when you said you're excited about the data, because one of the things that I believe very deeply is that this is such an incredibly creative process that helps you sort of get excited about what you're doing in your organization and seeing the processes and the progress that's being made. So thank you both so much for sharing this. Thank you to everybody who attended today. I want to wish you all a happy holiday, safe flying, and we will have more of these in the new year. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So in the meantime, everyone, happy holidays to you, and we'll see you next year. Thank you, Steve and Michael. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Merry
Yep.
Christmas, Happy New Year.
Merry
Bye-bye.
Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. Bye-bye.